clearly we had both. We had a blue wave and a red wave simultaneously. And how those are going to be integrating is what the issue is that's coming up. And one of those issues was decided in that court on Thanksgiving Eve this year, and it goes right to the heart of the difference between an RNA and a DNA-based vaccine. It goes right to the heart of the scientific discussion of what's the best way to control things that turn into pandemics. Pandemics are not only scientific and physical, they are also psychological and political. And we don't know yet whether our political and structural tools can handle whatever this COVID-19 thing is. And where vaccines fit into that is still an unresolved issue. I am very confident that if any government or other agency tries to force people to take vaccines, to mandate the COVID-19 vaccine, all hell's going to break loose, and we're going to see a huge crisis on our hands. I'm equally clear that if the argument is vaccines should not be used or should be banned or something negative about them should be dominant and squeeze them out of the equation, we will have a similar kind of outbreak of civil unrest and crisis. Only by figuring out how we're going to integrate the vaccine question with all the other options that exist as possibilities are we going to get ourselves through this thing on a political, economic, structural basis. So anyway, you triggered that by your question, and I didn't mean to get on my soapbox again, but I'll put it away here.
It's a great soapbox. I love it, and I love the history of it because, I wasn't around paying attention during the formation of a lot of these issues. So the idea that you could bring it to hey, what happened with the car industry happens with almost every industry over time really helps with some perspective on, things we see today. So all great stuff. So the question, Jim, is I don't know if you know about the difference now with these newer vaccines coming in, meaning they're not the weakened live virus. They're actually messing around with people's RNA. And I don't know enough about it to be able to say anything, but I'll just share with you a small little story. When my wife was pregnant with my first son, we lived in an apartment in Yonkers, which is in New York. And I got a phone call from my father-in-law said, you better come home. There was a little fire in the apartment. And when I went back, the whole entire apartment was completely destroyed. How the hell did that happen, I said. Well, the neighboring apartment, because remember, apartments, sometimes they have anybody who's ever lived in an apartment realizes you have neighbors. So there was a maintenance guy fixing a shower with a torch, and he fixed the shower on that apartment side with the torch. But the torch lit the insulation or whatever the hell it lit, and the fire spread to my apartment, which that maintenance guy had no clue and probably blamed something I did with my apartment on why there was now the fire trucks getting in the way of him moving his car for this wonderful repair job that he just did. So that's the way I feel about RNA vaccines. They might be looking like the maintenance guy. I'm fixing this shower. I'm using this little blowtorch. See, it's done. The water's coming out. Everything is fine. But they're really not paying attention to the fire that's being set on the other apartment and the devastation it may cause. And that's what I feel. So when people are saying, we have to rush to judgment and we're going to have all these hundreds of millions of doses and you're not going to be able to fly a plane until you show us your badge or your flag that you have this, it's kind of concerning for me, and I don't think I'm being an anti-vaxxer by raising a question, although by my very definition, I'm an anti-vaxxer. So do you have any comments about the different mechanism that they're using, this RMA modified thing versus the, we're going to find the COVID virus and we're going to weaken it?
Human beings have to be very clear that they are part of nature, not separate from nature. And so when they do something, it affects the natural environment within which they live. They affect everything around them. And when they talk about what they're going to affect, the talk is less inclusive than the experience that they're in the middle of. Our language, our numbers, our signals, our signs, and so forth are less inclusive than our experience. And we're trying desperately to make them cohesive, or we want to make them be interacting effectively. And we try to do that using all of our language tools. We want to make it all be congruent. And we make a lot of errors, intellectual, conceptual errors. I mean, just for example, we have a debate about vaccines. A significant number of the arguments I've seen about the so-called vaccine address the active part of the vaccine. That's the part that's the agent that you're talking about, the one that is somehow related to the thing that is believed to cause the negative events, whatever that thing is. So we have this thing that's called it's a different kind of thing, whatever it is, and we're trying to come up using our brains and our numbers and our models to managing that thing. And the result of that is that we may or may not get close and so on. But the whole discussion is only about that thing. We're going to all get injected, or whoever wants to get injected is going to get injected with something which, and the only way it's being discussed in terms of the actual policy is the active ingredient. But the thing itself, first of all, is a derivative of the active ingredient, and then secondly, contains all kinds of other stuff. It contains aluminum, maybe mercury. It contains adjuvant. It contains it's grown in fetal cells. An awful lot of people who have concerns about issues are faced with problems about a so-called vaccine product, which does not actually even address the actual active ingredient in a vaccine. So the point that you're making is the beginning of a very long and involved discussion. A part of what you're discussing happened in the 1976 event, because they took a slow-growing slow-growing swine flu virus from Asia, and they wrapped it in a rapidly growing sheath around it. And that rapidly growing component was meant to be able to have us manufacture more of the vaccine in this country than would come naturally, so that we would have a wall built up for when the natural stuff arrived, we could stop it. Well, that turned out not to be like the best idea in the world. It's very difficult to argue that the vaccine that is being prepared now is clearly the best answer. It may be the best answer available to us, but the best answer available to us may not work, or may cause side effects that are bad, or may cause your apartment to catch on fire. Those are the whole point of public policy is how to manage risk. And what's happening is the argument being made is that the risk of a worldwide pandemic of COVID-19 is so great that the risk of a vaccine, which might be significant, is worth taking. Now, there is an argument on the side of people who want to say you should take the risk of the vaccine that says vaccines are inherently safe. But that's just not accurate. The evidence doesn't support that. The federal government has paid over $4 billion to families whose children have been harmed or killed by vaccines. Now, I'm not arguing whether you should or you shouldn't take the risk. What I'm arguing is you cannot argue that there's no risk. And this kind of debate that goes on in the public media is one that I think the role it plays is identifying areas where you should put your attention and then go find the real facts somewhere else. They say, look, this is an important issue. Here are 2 or 3 headlines about that issue, and then here are some ways you can follow up on it. That's basically what they tell you on any, the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Cleveland Plain Dealer, Chicago Tribune, HuffPost. That's what they do. The same thing is done on Google and on all of the other various online stuff. They focus you on something, but you got to go like you're doing and dig up your own information, because we're in a state where everything has really altered quite significantly. And so I'm very cautious about the RNA vaccine. There's never been a successful RNA vaccine. They've tried before. They've all failed. It's going to be a very huge debate. Hopefully we can have a very raucous, tough debate without getting down to physical harm, either by violence or by misuse of some kind of newly developed scientific intervention. So dig out the information. We can talk about it more on it as other shows come up.
Absolutely. So great stuff. Now, I know it's the day after Thanksgiving, so for those people listening in, and by the way, Jim, just so you know, on the internet-connected people, they drop off after 30 minutes. So the best way for someone to listen in to the extended view is to dial in. So for those people that dial in, you're still here. For those people that were internet connected, you drop off after 30 minutes. And that's the way it's always been, and that's one of the reasons why we put it up on Building Fortunes Radio, where you can listen to the whole entire thing whenever you want to listen to the whole entire thing. I figured I'd just mention that to you just in case any of your friends are asking, I dropped off in 30 minutes, you were right in the middle of a sentence. That's one of the reasons why we do some of the things we do. Anyway, so back to...
How did they get on? How did they get on to the extended piece?
The extended piece, they would go to buildingfortunesradio.com/citizens for all of the radio shows. So that's where we actually take the long version and we put it up on buildingfortunesradio.com/citizens. So the live is live, and we have a 30-minute spot. And then if we go over, which many times we do, but no big deal, because we don't have as many people listening in live as we have listening on the archived. So it's just kind of like a trade-off of some of the things we do. But if you had somebody that was listening and they said, oh, man, you were just in the middle of a sentence and then you disappeared, that's okay. In a day or so, we're going to put it up on the radio show where you'll be able to hear the extended version. Or, so there's an or, if you want to hear the whole thing, call. Because the phone lines, oddly enough, don't drop off. It's just the internet line that drops off. So if you were on the phone, you don't know what I'm talking about because you're still listening to me. If you were on the internet, you dropped off. So anyway, so let's go back to stuff. And I don't, the whole politics of why was all this wonderful announcements and these approvals done right after the election. I mean, in my humble opinion, I have nothing based on facts except for common sense, which usually work pretty well. Obviously, it was politically motivated. Obviously. I mean, not by coincidence. All of a sudden, the week after, come on. So it's obviously, in my opinion, politically motivated. Doesn't matter. It's just the games that people play. I'm talking about people's lives here. But in reference to, if you want to touch base on the election and anything that's going on, and the transition teams and anything that's going on, certainly do. But also, if there's any forecasting that we can start to talk about the change in administration, because so far it looks like, wait a minute, I know all these people. It's kind of like if I wanted to restart my Electrolux business and I wanted to call all my Electrolux friends that I worked with, 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, we all knew each other. I mean, we were just like, yeah, there's no new faces. So it looks as if we're getting like a whole old crowd all back again. Now, whether that's good or not, I'm not sure. We'll see what they do. We'll give them the ability to kind of prove themselves. But do you want to comment on the election or the transition team or anything else?
Well, yeah, it's our culture. It's a cultural expression. It's a unique way that we do things, Americans, and we're different. I was really intrigued by seeing that the I guess his name is Madero. I don't know. I never even really knew much about him except reading his headlines in the paper every so often. Was the greatest soccer star in South America, in the world, I guess, and died. And it's huge. You go on the internet and look. It's huge. Masses of audiences, people just enormous. retrospectives on his life, public statements that he's made, his whole background, everything. I had very vaguely knew that he even existed. And
first time I heard of him.
Well,
first time.
For the heck of it, go look and you'll find out this thing is going on in the soccer world. And soccer, by the way, is far larger in the world than American football. What I noticed is there was no kind of subjective, energetic, emotional connection between me and that stuff. And I think that's going on in our politics. In order to look at the election stuff that I talk about and think about, a good place to go would be the Transpartisan Review, which I am a co-founder and author of editor of, with Lori Chickering, who is a very well established a friend of William F. Buckley and Milton Friedman and conservatives in general. I'm more in the category of dealing with Ralph Nader and Sherrod Brown from Ohio, where I'm from originally, and people that would be considered to be progressive. And we work together on looking at these issues because we think that, in fact, the left-right statement about things really is not large enough to take into account everything that's going on. So let's take a shot at the election for a minute. Florida is called a red state because they voted for Trump. But nonetheless, they voted for a statewide referendum raising the minimum wage in Florida to $15 an hour. That's a blue issue. So here's a red state voting on a blue issue. Over in California, it's clearly a blue state, according to the presidential campaign, and yet they voted against creating labor standards for Uber drivers and other gig workers, which is a blue issue, and the state voted against it. So here's a blue state by presidential numbers voting red on a labor issue. Our argument is that 70% of the American public does not identify with either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and they are trying to be heard. They are trying to articulate their position. They're trying to say, hey, there's other things besides the two. You're giving us two sides of all these issues, but there are other ways of looking at things. And not only that, if I vote for you on one issue, I have to take all the issues you bring along. We don't like that. And so you have a situation where you've got an electorate, which we think is primarily the 70%, and we call it transpartisan, and this electorate was really fascinating. They excised a president out who was very troublesome to a large number of the people, 80 million or so, probably mostly because of the first debate. I would say, in retrospect, if Trump had behaved in the first debate the way he behaved in the second debate, at a minimum, he would be more likely to be president now, and probably, I don't say probably, but possibly, could be president if he had acted in the first debate. If he acted in the first debate the way he did in the second debate, there was a shift of almost 80% in the uncommitted voters after that election. The vast majority of which was toward Biden after that first debate. And I think that if one particular thing wanted to be singled out for tactically what hurt Trump, it was that performance. But the second point is that this 70% is trying to be heard. So they cut back on the president's power. I think the new president is going to be weaker than the old president. The presidency itself is weaker. They cut back on the power of the Democrats in the House, and they cut back on the power of the Republicans in the Senate. And it's not clear whether they cut back a little bit or a whole lot. That's still open up in Georgia. But they definitely will be less powerful in the next session than they were previously to that. Not by much, but they will have fewer senators, one fewer senator. If these two senators go Democratic, then the power will 100% of the political power in the country will be in the hands of the Democrats. Just the very fact that that's possible suggests how tightly the country's balanced. It's a very interesting expression from what we think of the 70% transpartisans. As I said, there were arguments: are we going to have a blue wave or a red wave? And I'm saying we had both. The two largest voting blocks for president in the history of the country are the one for Biden and then the second one for Trump. And as one of my friends said, this wasn't really an election, it was a referendum. And the referendum was, do people consider voting important or not? And the fact of the matter is that one option that existed prior to the election was the possibility that large numbers of the 70% would drop out and say, we're not interested, we don't think it's important. Well, that didn't happen. We have an enormously strong commitment to voting as a key way of moving forward. Now, in the aftermath, here's the Trumpites from the White House, one of them anyway, the president, attacking the Trumpite that is the Secretary of State of Georgia. I mean, the Secretary of State of Georgia, who is certifying the election as having gone for Biden, is a Trump supporter. His family is a Trump contributors. And he's going around saying, hey, when the people on the left acted crazy, we attacked them and said, you're acting crazy. Why aren't we doing that to the people on the right who are acting crazy? And so the basics of what's happened is he's been attacked by Trump and sued by a lawyer that claimed to represent Trump, although the Trump people are debating that lawyer did not represent them. I mean, this is all very fascinating to watch. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this debate on the Trump side of things goes. And it's interesting because Trump Sr. is highly critical of what's going on in Georgia, and Trump Jr. is out there campaigning vigorously for the Republican candidate. Trump Sr. has been critical of the Republican candidate. So even in the family itself, there's a difference of opinion. All of this stuff pieced together reinforces our view from the transpartisan point of view that the basic situation we have in the country right now is 70% of the public trying to find a way to articulate its views politically and being blocked by the political class trying to gerrymander, undermine, suppress votes, and so forth. It's an effort of people who have power to hold on to the power they have. And they're using all the various tools they can come up with to do that. And the people who are not in power, which is basically 70%, they don't even get heard. That group is saying, all right, we have the vote. We're going to try to do something about this. And what they came up with was cut back the president's power, cut back the House Democrats' power, cut back the Republicans' Senate's power, and let's see what happens. And if you guys can't get it all together by 2022, we're going to do another round of this. And 2024, we're going to do another round. And both parties are in very interesting power struggles between their order and freedom wings. And we'll see how that all unfolds.
Interesting points. So we are coming close to the December, whoever you talk to, 8th, 12th, 14th deadline for them or someone to finally announce Donald Trump not being the president or Donald Trump being the president or Joe Biden or whoever. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, but how do I ask you what I think is going to happen without asking you for a prediction? So so I might as well just ask you. So what do you think is going to happen? And I'll go first. I'll do like checkers. I think Donald Trump is going to probably try to do everything he possibly can to hold on, but I don't think it's going to work. So I said that from the very, very, very beginning. Donald Trump is not going to be able to hold on, and that dismays a lot of our Building Fortress Radio listening audience. I just think, when you take a look at the fight, I think he's going to lose, most of it being power and timing, because you got to try to put together something like this to basically change the way people look at a whole entire system in a couple of weeks, and that's not possible, particularly with Rudy Giuliani as his personal lawyer spearheading this thing. So that's just not possible. So I think it's going to end. Joe Biden's going to finish his process, and Donald Trump's going to go into whatever Donald Trump is going to be with a lot of people that will follow him wherever he wants to go as groupies. But that's my prediction, Jim. I don't know what you think is going to happen on your side. But we're coming up.
You watch the signs. First of all, as they say in the football games, the college or NFL, as an Ohio State alum, I watch football a lot, and the momentum is on the Biden side, and I don't see anything that's going to break that. It just seems to me that that something would have to occur that would throw the Biden momentum off, and I just don't see anything. And what I do see is Trump taking positions, publicly on his Twitter accounts and so forth. He's going to fight to the death. But he did have a discussion with his Secret Service group and asked them which ones wanted to take a job with him and be relocated to Florida, because he gets Secret Service support after he's not president any longer. So he's asking those guys, who wants to move to Florida. That's probably the strongest sign of an indication that he's already planning to recognize the inevitability of the power flow. The next thing is that he did say that if the Electoral College did vote for Biden, he would accept that as the outcome. He said that. He said he would accept that as the outcome. He would keep fighting to make elections fair and get rid of all the bad things that happened to him and all of that. But those two things are pretty strong straws in the wind about where he thinks things are going. Finally, he's having now a discussion about whether he will show up at the inauguration or not. That's the next discussion. The most interesting problem that exists here is the Republicans. They don't know what to do. If they come out and support Trump, they're going to have a huge backlash in Georgia from people who voted against Trump in Georgia. I mean, remember, Trump lost Georgia, and these guys have to be very careful. What they want to do is bring back the Trump voters that voted for Trump but still want to vote Republican. So they have to be very, very careful about being too strongly pro-Trump. On the other hand, they have to be really careful about not alienating the people who are the Trump people, the Trump base. Because if they're alienated, they're already talking about not voting. They're saying, just stay home and don't vote. And that is something they have to watch out for. So they have to be very, very careful how they handle this situation. And once again, I would argue that this is an example of how transpartisan works. Because the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of people aren't particularly happy with either the way the Democrats are going to run things or the way the Republicans are going to run things, or at least the way they expect they're going to run them. The vast majority of people are not very happy with the way the governing system works. And so they're looking for ways to say, we're not happy, pay attention to us. And right now, with 2 seats online in Georgia that could control the Senate, it's a very interesting problem for them. How do they hang on to the Trump voters without alienating the anti-Trump voters, or vice versa? So that's where we're at, I think. Hey, it's 1 o'clock. I think we should stop. We're a half hour over.
I think we're a half hour over, and really excellent information. I love listening to all of your great things. We have too many topics to talk about, but if you want to check them out, go to buildingfortunesradio.com/citizens, and you can hear the previous radio shows. And then, of course, make sure you sign up for the newsletter on citizens.org. Citizens, CITIZENS.org, and sign up for the newsletter. They send out really appropriate information, and many times it might even be specific for the location where you're at and the topics that you're looking for as well. So great information. Jim, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for spending some time with us today after Thanksgiving, and we have so many things to talk about. We could run a Jerry Lewis marathon for those people that would remember.
Well, thanks a lot, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks. I like the chance, and we'll be back on next week.
We got you. Thanks. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Citizens for Health radio show, brought to you by Citizens for Health on buildingfortunesradio.com with Jim Turner and Peter Mingles. Thanks for listening. For nearly 2 decades, Citizens for Health has been a nonprofit pioneer in the natural health freedom movement. Go to www.citizens.org to learn more, and always listen in to Building Fortunes Radio, where our special host, Jim Turner, shares crucial information about many of the most important issues that affect your world. Citizens for Health provides over 100,000 supporters with consumer news, action alerts, and opportunities to take action. So listen in, get involved, and help spread the word. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website to hear more Citizens for Health segments with Jim Turner and Peter Mingles, and read about what's new on www.citizens.org. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. Jim Turner, Peter, and I want to say thanks for listening and ask you to go spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and